government business.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move that the Assembly now discuss the matter of public importance.
The question is that the Assembly move on to the MPI. All those in favour say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Honourable members, I have received correspondence from the member for Arnhem as follows. I propose for discussion this day the following definite matter of public importance. Since August 2024, the CLP government has failed Territorians with multiple broken election commitments, including scrapping underground power in the northern suburbs, reneging on renewables and climate change targets, failing to deliver on community safety and cutting critical funding to Aboriginal ranges. Meanwhile, the 2025-26 budget lacks a clear economic vision for the Territory, with deep cuts to key infrastructure projects in roads, health and education that will have a significant detrimental impact on many Territory communities. The letter is signed by the member for Arnhem. Is discussion supported? Discussion is supported. I call the member for Arnhem.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At the last election, the people of the Northern Territory were promised honesty by the CLP. They were promised transparency. They were promised leadership with integrity. But what they've gotten so far, Madam Speaker, is a CLP government that lies, hides, cuts and runs. And let's call it for what it is, a betrayal of Territorians, a deliberate pattern of deception, broken commitments and cowardice. The Chief Minister didn't just fail to deliver, Madam Speaker, she's failed to front up and take responsibility as the leader of the Northern Territory. She's ripped away vital funding for communities and then run for cover every time. And let's start with the underground high voltage power for the Darwin northern suburbs, a promise that was funded and would have made real and positive impact for local communities in a tropical and seasonal climate. But before the election, not a word about cancelling the project. After the election, well, cancelled. And a fabricated cost blowout used to cover the CLP tracks. The CLP lied to Territorians, Madam Speaker, to justify one of their first major cuts and broken promises to Territorians. Then there's the ministerial share scandal. The Chief Minister claimed her shadow cabinet had divested all of their shares, but that was a lie too. The member for Katherine, Minister Jo Hersey, was still holding on to her Telstra shares after taking office and only divested her shares once it became an article in the NT Independent. Madam Speaker, it's hypocrisy to the highest order, especially after the moral outrage that the CLP, when in opposition, was creating about shareholdings. So let's talk about integrity, Madam Speaker. The CLP government promised transparency, but then tried to sneak through their Territory Coordinator Bill. This is a bill, Madam Speaker, that gives sweeping powers to an unelected bureaucrat without proper scrutiny. And so far, $21 million has been spent on the Office of the Territory Coordinator and not a single outcome to date. And let's not forget, Madam Speaker, the Chief Minister, 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙈𝙀 appointed the Territory Coordinator to an Executive Contract Officer role, one of the highest paid public servants in the Northern Territory. And she appointed this position without a single process of open recruitment. The CLP, Madam Speaker, promised a lobbyist register, but what we got was a dodgy tokenistic list and some little paper form that doesn't even pass the Territory pub test. Real transparency? Well, this mob wouldn't recognise if it hit them in the face, Madam Speaker. The CLP promised Territorians that having an assistant minister would not cost the taxpayers any extra dollars. And now we're discovering, Madam Speaker, that they have been added to junkets with no explanation whatsoever of what benefit or what reporting process or what role that assistant minister has to provide certainty to the Territory that they are using taxpayer dollars. And there is no scrutiny on any of this travel. The CLP promised to get kids back to school, but they have spent so far $20 million on a truancy program and has seen less kids go to school in every region across the Northern Territory except Darwin. The The CLP promised Territorians that each child in the Territory would get free swimming lessons, and so far we have discovered that schools have now had to pay for these processes, for the travel and logistics, which was called free. And unless some of the schools in our remote regions, Madam Speaker, buy Clark rubber pools or drive to Queensland or are flown into Darwin, they will not see the benefit of the free swimming program. Madam Speaker, in corrections, the CLP has made a shopping list of promises. 2 new work camps, compulsory rehabilitation, boot camps for young people, new programs to cut reoffending. No one has delivered or funded any of this in the new budget, Madam Speaker. Not a single one of these promises has been funded in a CLP budget. Meanwhile, police are begging for support for the watch houses, which are overflowing, and the police are burnt out. Madam Speaker, what the CLP is doing to our police is utter disgrace. Let's call it for what it is again, a betrayal of Territorians. The CLP government promised to stand with police no matter what. They promised to fix the system. They promised to keep frontline officers where they belong, out protecting our streets. And instead, Madam Speaker, they have broken that promise. Right now, across the Northern Territory, police officers are being pulled off the beat to manage overflowing watch houses, turned into de facto prison guards because the government can't get corrections under control, though they promised they had a plan. Madam Speaker, the Palmerston Watch House is packed. 92 detainees in a facility that was never designed for that load of people. Police officers are working emergency rosters and are now doing 12-hour shifts, not because there's a cyclone, but because the CLP government created this crisis. And what do they get in return, Madam Speaker? No, nothing. No recognition, no support, not even the retention bonus that they were led to believe in the lead up to the Territory election. Madam Speaker, only a small fraction of police will receive the CLP's so-called retention bonus. Those with anniversaries that only fall in this financial year, and that's about 180 officers, Madam Speaker. So, what about the 1,700 other police officers who are led to believe that this election promise was going to benefit them? Well, they've been left behind, another broken promise by the CLP government. This was used as a political prop, Madam Speaker, before the election. Then the police have been abandoned. The NT Police Association has been very clear. This scheme is divisive, unfair and failing to retain our police officers. It's causing more resignations, not fewer. And the Chief Minister, the Police Minister, well, Madam Speaker, she's just brushed it off, pretending that it's all part of their plan and that that promise was never made. Well, who do we believe, Madam Speaker? If the plan is to burn out our police officers, destroy morale and gut the frontline services, then congratulations, CLP, you've done it, it's working. We're seeing the consequences play out in real time. Fewer police on our streets and more crime, watch houses at breaking point, and a CLP government that would rather spin its way out than take responsibility. Madam Speaker, every government has responsibility to protect its people and to protect those who protect us. This government is doing neither. Our police deserve better, they deserve respect, they deserve support, they deserve a government that doesn't turn its back the minute the election is over. The CLP is failing all of us on crime, and they're failing on staffing. They're failing on integrity. They should front up, admit the mistake and fix it, or step aside for a new leader, Madam Speaker, to see what the CLP can actually do when they're not micromanaged, because Territorians cannot afford to wait. Perhaps the biggest failure, Madam Speaker, of the CLP government so to date is on law and order. The latest crime statistics confirm what Territorians have been telling us for months. The CLP government's promise to make territories safe has already been broken. No amount of spin from 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎, the Chief Minister, can change the reality facing our communities across the NT. No glossy media release can hide the truth. Under the CLP government, violent crime is surging, and no name-calling can change that fact. Across the Northern Territory, total assaults are up by 1.7% in just 5 months. Serious assaults have increased by 5.7%. Domestic violence assaults have jumped by 9.3%, with alcohol-fuelled domestic violence rising a shocking 10.4%. Sexual offences have soared by 22.2%. Offences that harm or endanger people are up more than 30%. And alcohol-related assaults have risen by 8.1% across the Territory. Property damage is also spiralling out of control, Madam Speaker, up by 19%. But the numbers alone don't tell the full story. We're seeing the real impact on the ground, especially in places like Katherine, Madam Speaker, violent crimes in Katherine has exploded, and long-term residents who say they have never seen the town as bad as this before. Offences against the person up nearly 30%. Sexual offences in Katherine have skyrocketed by a staggering 136%. And just in the last week, we've seen the consequences. A stabbing at the Katherine Showgrounds, a fatal car crash involving a stolen vehicle. This is really what's happening in our communities, Madam Speaker, and what's the CLP response? Well, they're issuing media releases patting themselves on the back. Shocking. They're pretending that everything's under control. This is a slap in the face for the people of Katherine and to everyday Territorians who say they are not feeling safe in their own community and they want to see our police supported. Madam Speaker, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't call this out. The Territory deserves honesty, and they deserve a government that fronts up and takes responsibility for what is happening right across the Northern Territory. They deserve a government that is going to be accountable and that does not hide behind spin and self-congratulation at every opportunity. Madam Speaker, we need real leadership. We need a real plan to tackle the crisis in crime and community safety across the Territory. We need a government that actually listens, no one that dismisses the very people who are sounding the alarm and have been doing so for months. Madam Speaker, right now, the message from the CLP is sadly clear. They're more focused on saving face than saving Territorians and keeping them safe. Well, we won't let them off the hook, Madam Speaker. We'll be calling this out because communities deserve better, and this is what the CLP promised Territorians they would do. Madam Speaker, the CLP government has cut over $1 billion in infrastructure, from hospitals and school projects, from domestic violence shelters and critical roads infrastructure. These cuts are hurting real Territorians in every corner of the NT. Madam Speaker, the CLP has broken their word on voluntary assisted dying. They broke it on abortion rights, claiming no changes were on the table, only for one of their very own MLAs to table a petition to repeal them, and this was backed by the Deputy Chief Minister. The CLP said no austerity measures, but now every government department is being told to find $20 million in cuts. That's austerity by stealth. Madam Speaker, the CLP is flip-flopping on their hiring freeze in the public service, with the Chief Minister saying one thing and then being contradicted by her very own Minister for Public Employment, the member for Katherine. The Chief Minister has to take accountability, Madam Speaker, and they've sidelined the Minister for Health and sent the Treasurer fishing. They have gutted climate commitments, renewables targets and accountability. They have lied about the cost of renewables. They have broken their key election promise on the premium fit for solar. And, Madam Speaker, the CLP have kept Gamba grass funding stagnant despite promising more. And what of Aboriginal Rangers? Well, Madam Speaker, the CLP promised in black and white with the member for 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙋𝙎, who is very shameful that he was the one pushed up in front to do this, that they would deliver on the commitment of $12 million over 4 years. Madam Speaker, do the quick maths, that's $3 million per annum for a 4-year commitment. An election commitment 101, Madam Speaker, when it comes to governing is when you make an election commitment, you have the responsibility when you get elected to fund that commitment in your budget. That's how it works. Commitments, election, funded. That's how it works. You make that work in your budget. And what they did was quietly strike out the $12 million, which they had committed openly, publicly, in black and white by the member for 𝙏𝙗𝙈, by the now Treasurer Bill Yan, and absolutely took no responsibility or accountability in scrapping that election commitment, which affects over 47 Aboriginal Ranger groups across the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, the CLP promised to improve aged care, and then they cut funding to the Palmerston Aged Care Facility. The CLP promised to ban gillnet fishing, and then have flip-flop ever since becoming government. The CLP promised to cut approval wait times, but when the Chief Minister is asked what, she can't even name a single one. And Madam Speaker, this is a pattern. It is not an accident. It is becoming clear that the CLP has a pattern of bad governing. Madam Speaker, this is a CLP government that is not only dishonest but indifferent. They do not care who they hurt, who is accountable when they are avoiding scrutiny, Madam Speaker. And the most galling part, they do not even have the decency to look Territorians in the eyes when they admit they got it wrong or they've made a decision that they have lied about an election commitment, and they do not even have the guts to front up and to face the very people who are affected by the decisions they have made in their own government. Madam Speaker, the CLP hide, the CLP deflect, the CLP point fingers to the past, and most recently, another pattern of behaviour led by the Chief Minister 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏𝙀𝙎, the CLP name call. Just like petty school kids who can't get along, they name call to point every other finger other than on themselves. They are never taking responsibility, Madam Speaker, the sign of weak leadership. Madam Speaker, Territorians absolutely deserve better. They deserve leadership that keeps promises. They deserve a government that keeps its election commitments after being elected to govern. They deserve leadership with integrity, leadership that focus on Territorians and the needs of what Territorians have asked them to do. Madam Speaker, leadership that fronts up and doesn't run away when things get tough or tricky. The CLP promised the world and so far have only delivered excuses. Madam Speaker, when we talk about domestic violence, one of the most plaguing forms of violence across the Northern Territory, in October last year, the CLP, through their leader, 𝙏𝙏𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏𝙀𝙏, the Chief Minister, promised to bring together a bipartisan delegation of this Northern Territory Parliament, which was very much supported by the DV sector, Madam Speaker, to call on the federal government to fully fund and to properly fund the Northern Territory on a needs basis when it comes to domestic, family and sexual violence prevention. We have not seen anything since, because at the time the Chief Minister was put under the spotlight. She had nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. She's learnt how to do that since. And she promised that she would work in a bipartisan way. And so far, we have not, since the federal election, which we know the results of that one in May, Madam Speaker, she has not taken leadership on this very core area of focus in the NT. An area that our NT police said, if domestic violence was properly funded and reduced in the Northern Territory, it would support the workload of our police as well. It would support the workload of our corrections and youth justice officers as well, Madam Speaker. But they continue to deflect and try and dodge accountability and responsibility, not the leadership of any government, Madam Speaker. The credibility of the CLP in just 11 months, 1 month short of the year anniversary of being elected, is in tatters. And so is the trust of Territorians, the very people they swore that they would serve once being elected. Madam Speaker, our Territory Labor opposition will continue to hold the CLP government to account every step of the way for the next 3 years and 1 month left. Whether the CLP like this or not, Territorians deserve better, Madam Speaker. And when it comes to ensuring that Territorians have a government who is accountable, open and transparent like they promised, we will call that out. Whether we have name calls, whether we have the disrespect of the CLP, whether we have any of the name calling to the work that we do, or the very organisations and experts who are on the ground facing day in, day out the pressures of the justice system, or the pressures and the horrific reality of family, domestic and sexual violence across the Northern Territory, we will be there to call out the government on what they promised and what they stay silent on, what they are complicit in, Madam Speaker. So all the name-calling in the world by the Chief Minister, the petty politics that we start to see when they do not like what someone says. There's an attack or they ignore. When we've seen last week, Madam Speaker, the extraordinary move by the 4 Aboriginal land councils to say they will not accept the bad behaviour and the ignorance of the CLP government anymore, and they want to be involved in the leadership decisions that affect Aboriginal Territorians. The work that they want to do with the government has been completely ignored and disregarded when it comes to the response from the CLP government. And that comes from the leader, Madam Speaker. That comes from the Chief Minister, Leah Finocchiaro, who is running scared, who is name-calling like a spoiled little child, running around telling everyone what to do, and everyone's too frightened to speak up in her team, obviously. And when you do speak up, you're seen as a threat. So then you're punished and told to be quiet. So the sign of bad government, Madam Speaker, is starting to show, but we will be here in the Parliament, out in the Territory, on the streets, in our communities, on our homelands, calling out the government to accountability. We will be doing that whether they like it or not, because they should hang their head in shame. In less than 1 year of governing, they have already disappointed Territorians and broken commitments and promises.
Member for Namatjira, the Treasurer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And, Madam Speaker, I rise to speak to what I don't think is actually a matter of public importance. Really, is it? And I thank you, Madam Speaker, for your clarification earlier today as to what is and what will be determined as a matter of public importance to this Parliament. Because I just sat there and I think what Labor and the opposition might consider as a matter of public importance, I don't think the rest of the people in the Territory probably consider it as a matter of public importance. I think there's more important things that matter to them. And the Leader of the Opposition went on at length about domestic violence. That would have been a good MPI to bring to this Parliament and discuss that tonight. And I know the Minister for Domestic and Family Violence or the prevention of gave a good outline of what we're doing into the future. So you could have brought that as a matter of public importance, but all we heard was a rant and a spray from the Leader of the Opposition. I want to touch on a few points that the Leader of the Opposition raised. Failed Territorians with multiple broken election commitments. Now, it was never our election commitment for underground power. That was a Labor commitment, and I'll speak about that a little bit longer later. But I want to clarify the record because, again, the Leader of the Opposition is trying to rewrite history. Now, they'd put aside $60 million for the undergrounding of power in the northern suburbs, and I'll go into depth in that later. But it was actually Power and Water. It was the CEO of Power and Water that came to me 2 months after the election, and we'd been sworn in as ministers, that come to me and said, we can't do this. $60 million is not enough to underground power. We need more money. We can't do it with $60 million. Can you cease this project because we can't do it for $60 million? So for the Leader of the Opposition to stand over there and saying that, oh, we calculated and we were underhanded and we planned to do this before the election is absolutely wrong, and I want to set the record very, very straight on that matter, Madam Speaker, because it was Power and Water who came to me as a shareholding minister and asked, can you please stop this? We can't do it for $60 million. And of course, reneging on renewable targets, well, they were not our renewable targets. They were Labor's renewable targets, Madam Speaker. And of course, what we're actually doing, we're still going down the road of renewable energy because it is the right thing to do. But what we're doing, Madam Speaker, we're doing it in a manner that is not going to break the bank. We're going to do it in a fiscally responsible way. Renewables will actually provide cheap power, but we have to be able to do it in a manner that A, is not going to break the bank, is fiscally responsible, and then fits in with the rest of the network. Labor blindly went down the renewables path and contracted people to put in solar farms and do all this other work, but they didn't do that all-important work and investment on firming up that power grid. So those solar power stations, all those big solar stations outside of Darwin, sat there idle. They were unable to hook into the grid because those opposite didn't have enough forethought to do the work to make sure that they'd actually fit into the grid. Now, I'm going to go back into the rest of the MPI, Madam Speaker. Not that it's really an MPI. This should have been a matter for General Business Day for the government. They should have probably brought this as a motion. As I said, it's not really a matter of public importance. But, Madam Speaker, for Labor to claim that the CLP has no economic vision, well, Madam Speaker, as usual, Labor just don't particularly get it. They didn't know how to put together a budget when they were in government, and now that they're in opposition, it still seems they don't know how to read a budget book either, because there was claims made by the Leader of the Opposition that just are not true. The previous government don't exactly have a leg to stand on when it comes to critiquing this government on its economic development initiatives. Labor's idea of an economic vision was to take Territorians for an 8-year ride and let debt balloon by 800%. Their idea of a debt management plan after the Langland report in 2019, Madam Speaker, was to let net debt triple in 5 years. Their idea of economic growth was an embarrassing low 1% of growth per annum. And their idea of a budget, Madam Speaker, was to write a wish list of everything they wanted to fund but couldn't, and their idea of an infrastructure program was a pile of press releases instead of finding a pile of cash to actually fund it. And of course, the Leader of the Opposition spoke about deep cuts, but you can't cut, Madam Speaker, what was never funded. Yet this government's overall capital works program has been brought down to reality. The actual cash allocation to the program under the CLP's first budget is higher than what Labor put into their infrastructure program. I'll repeat that. Our cash component for this year's infrastructure program is higher than what Labor had. And Madam Speaker, this is what's important. Cash is real. Cash is what's used to pay contractors and business owners and what builds real infrastructure. Madam Speaker, Labor's infrastructure program offered up a pipe dream of infrastructure projects, but the CLP's infrastructure program actually offers up a $4.34 billion pipeline of projects. And this pipeline of projects shows that this government does actually have a clear economic vision. Madam Speaker, our government is investing $2 billion into transport infrastructure because the CLP knows that the backbone of the Territory isn't just people who call it home, it's the roads that connect those people. And as I said, I'd love to make every road in the Territory bitumen, but we don't have the money to do that. We have to prioritise. We only have a limited amount of cash. So roads will get done as we can do them, but I'm not going to break the bank and beggar the Northern Territory like Labor were going to do. And these roads, like the Tanami Road Corridor, the Northern Territory National Network Highway and the Central Arnhem Road upgrades drive our economy and underpin access to health, education and opportunities for people in the bush. They allow communities to weather disasters in our unique and challenging environment. However, we cannot make the Territory the best place to do business and get people to put down roots here if they don't feel safe. And that's why the Finocchiaro CLP government's first budget made a record $1.5 billion investment in the police, corrections and justice. And that, Madam Speaker, is the largest law and order spend by any government in the Territory's history. And a Leader of the Opposition said that we hadn't invested into corrections. Well, again, I don't think she's reading the budget books correct. I believe my colleague, the Corrections Minister, is going to have a bit of a chat and he can talk about the significant investment that's going into corrections to make sure that we have the infrastructure, the programs, the staff and the ability to deal with the root cause of crime and actually start to rehabilitate offenders, rather than what Labor did. And I was there and I seen it, Madam Speaker, and it was just a rack 'em and stack 'em model. They cut spending out of industries, they cut spending out of programs, they didn't do a damn thing for corrections, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we're funding early intervention measures, allocating funding to support territories that have been victimised by crime and investing $270 million to expand community safety infrastructure, such as emergency services, communication centres and remote policing centres. A safe territory allows us to build an economically viable territory to fund essential services and our lifestyle. The problem isn't that this CLP government doesn't have an economic vision, it's just that Labor can't see it. Labor have never been serious about the territory's economic future, and it's laughable that they're pretending to fight for it now. Unlike Labor, Madam Speaker, the CLP is serious about repairing our budget and rebuilding our economy. And Madam Speaker, our budget repair strategy consists of 5 points. And I've spoken about this strategy many times in this chamber, but since Labor are so desperate to hear our economic vision for the territory, I'll lay it out in detail once again. Our first strategy is to grow our own source revenue, and this means bulking up our balance sheet through developing our key industries and economic reforms that cut red tape and green tape, and all sorts of other tape that are out there. Our second strategy is to focus on sustainable FDE growth in frontline services. And let me be clear, this government is not cutting the public service. Instead, we're focused on recruiting in health, education, policing and corrections, recruiting where it is needed. Our third strategy is standing up for Territorians with Canberra. And Madam Speaker, I am in frequent contact with my counterparts in Canberra. Our government consistently advocates on behalf of Territorians so that we can partner with the Commonwealth on projects of mutual benefit and give the Territory the financial support we need to dig ourselves out of Labor's financial meltdown. Our fourth strategy is doing what government does better. Unlike Labor, Madam Speaker, the CLP respects Territorians' money. So if we want to guarantee that they are getting the best bang for buck as we reduce crime, rebuild the economy and restore our lifestyle, we will. We're doing this through improved program delivery and ensuring government funding is going towards what it was intended for. And of course, our fifth strategy is to manage our debt and implement our fiscal strategy. And most importantly, the CLP's approach is to spend what we have to on what we need, not what we don't need. Madam Speaker, this is the only way that we can stop Labor's debt pile-on so Territorians aren't forced to continue shouldering Labor's previously bad decisions. This strategy, Madam Speaker, is just one layer of this CLP's economic vision and our work getting the Territory economy back on track. We also have an economic strategy that is rebuilding the economy and rebuilding it for all Territorians with our regions at the forefront. We have passed amendments such as the Petroleum, Planning and Water Legislation Amendment Bill that makes it possible for economic development to occur in the bush, something the previous government couldn't do. We're creating an open economic environment through the Territory Coordinator's Office so that Territory is a place where investment is sought out instead of driven away. The CLP's economic vision is already playing out and the Territory businesses are now benefiting from the work we've done last year. And thanks to the CLP, our payroll tax regime has the highest threshold in the nation, stimulating job creation and backing small business. We've also gotten rid of payroll tax for not-for-profit entities, giving them the ability to reinvest what they earn into what they do, providing better services for our community. We have the most generous first homeowner grants in the country, with over 600 applications and over 200 new builds in the pipeline. Our government's $9.62 million investment in grants has had a direct economic contribution of $86.4 million, Madam Speaker. We've ditched Labor's debt cap. We've stopped Labor's debt spiral, and we've given Territorians funding certainty where Labor couldn't. There should be no doubt, Madam Speaker, in Territorians' minds that the CLP has a strong economic plan for them, and in our year of action, we are well and truly living up to this title. Madam Speaker, our economic plan isn't just talk. We're walking the walk, and industry knows it. In ComSec's latest State of the State report, just released yesterday, the Northern Territory ranked first for economic growth construction work and housing finance. Now, Madam Speaker, this is a report, as you'll remember correctly, that the previous Labor government bagged. No, the ComSec report has no idea. They're basing it on previous 10 years. Well, we do know that ComSec now based on year averages. So they canned this report for so many years. And of course, we're leading all other states by almost 700 basis points in economic growth and over 1,000 basis points in housing finance on an annual basis. And the Territory isn't just ranking above other states and territories, the CLP and the Territory is leaving them dead behind. Madam Speaker, Labor had 8 years to do this. They had 8 long years to implement their economic vision, and instead Territorians got a mountain of debt and a dying economy. And for a juxtaposition on an old saying, Madam Speaker, they came, they spent, and they borrowed. The closest they ever got to an economic strategy was their tagline that they would grow the Territory economy to $40 billion by 2030. And they may have hit it, Madam Speaker. That's possible, but the only way they would have got there wasn't through anything of their own work. It was probably just because of inflation. Inflation may have just trickled them over the line. On the other hand, Madam Speaker, the CLP government is absolutely accelerating towards that target. In real terms, our state file demand grew by 4.6% to $8.4 billion over the year to March 2025. If the ComSec State of the States report is anything to go by, this government is setting the Territory up well for 2030 and beyond, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, if it wasn't for the decisions Labor made over the past 8 years, our economy would probably be even stronger. This government, of course, may not be able to change the past, but it's the decisions that we make now will change the Territory's future. And that's why we had the financial sense to walk away from Labor's commitment to underground power in the northern suburbs. And what we found out was a terrible deal for Territorians. Madam Speaker, it is an absolute joke that Labor is claiming that we broke an election commitment on this when under Labor's leadership, they flip-flopped on it for years on their commitment to underground power in Darwin. Now, here's a history lesson, Madam Speaker, and again, this gives me the opportunity to set the record straight. In 2018, Labor announced they would fully underground 13 suburbs for $290 million. In 2022, they revised that down to only $60 million, and they were only going to underground the high voltage network. 2 years later, Madam Speaker, Labor changed their minds again, or more likely realise they're in deep financial trouble and continue to cost this program at $60 million, but now it was only for 3 suburbs. Madam Speaker, suddenly $60 million went from covering 13 suburbs to 3. So we can see why the budget blew out, because their accounting practices weren't that great. Fast forward to now, Madam Speaker, and Power and Water is telling our government that the cost of undergrounding the entire 13 suburbs could cost up to $1 billion if it went ahead. Now, I got a figure from Power and Water a number of months ago, because when they first came to me and asked me to cease this project, I said, well, go away and do the sums and come back and tell me what it would really cost to do this. And they come back with around about $600 million. But they've been doing further work on this, Madam Speaker, and they've re-evaluated that figure. And of course, yes, that's $1 billion with a B. Imagine if Labor had remained in power and gone down this path. $60 million, it sounds awfully familiar, doesn't it, Madam Speaker? Oh, we're going to go do this, they've got a budget of $60 million, but oh dear, it's probably going to cost, or maybe $60 million, or might be $600 million. Oh, now it's $1 billion. Labor's debt disaster would have spiralled to unimaginable depths, with an addition of $50 million per year in interest just to cover that debacle. To cover that cost, Madam Speaker, the government would have likely hit Territorian households with a $1,000 increase to their energy bill just to cover the cost. Can Territorians really blame the CLP government from walking away from this? And I think I made a very good decision when Power and Water came to me and said, we can't do this for this money. And I backed them in and said, OK, we'll stop it. Let's go away and do the real work to find out what it's really going to cost. But it wasn't the CLP that got us into this mess, as the Labor opposition would have you believe today. But it's the CLP that's getting the Territory out of it, Madam Speaker, which is why we reprioritised the funding for that underground power in the northern suburbs in our early term. This is not a part that this government had full view of until we got into government, but once we did get there, of course, Madam Speaker, is a path we knew that we couldn't drag Territorians down. And I just want to touch on a couple of things before I finish out here, Madam Speaker, because again, we have the Leader of the Opposition trying to rewrite history, specifically around crime statistics. Yes, I know that some of the crime statistics have gone up by 10% here, 12% there, but overall, we've seen robbery, violence and theft right across the whole Territory down 39%, house break-ins down 31%, commercial break-ins down 16%, and other theft down 15%. Now let's put this into context, Madam Speaker, because this is what the Leader of the Opposition chooses not to do. Let's look at the crime stats year on year from 2016 to 2024. Homicide and related offences under Labor up 62%. Acts intended to cause injury up 62%. Sexual assault and related offences up 15%. Dangerous or negligent acts endangering persons up 38%. Robbery, extortion and related offences up a staggering 316%. Total offences against the person up 59%. House break-ins up 100%. Commercial break-ins up 13%. Domestic violence assaults up a staggering 83%. So for the Leader of the Opposition to come in and say some of these stats have gone up when you look at Labor's history on crime, they do not have a leg to stand on, Madam Speaker, and they should hang their heads in shame.
Any more speakers? No more member for Catherine.
It's very interesting, Madam Speaker, that it is the opposition's MPI and no one seems to be wanting to talk about it. Too slow, you snooze, you lose. So the Leader of the Opposition, in actual fact, Madam Speaker, I feel quite embarrassed listening to the opposition leader's absolute rant on her MPI. As we heard before, MPI is a matter of public importance, and to come in and have a spray and a rant, as the member for 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 said, it's more emotion if she wants to talk so broadly about things in an MPI. She also spoke about the land councils and the fact we saw the land councils the other day out the front of Parliament House. I mean, these land councils have a responsibility to Aboriginal people as well, Madam Speaker, to support them with economic development and, progressing in their communities and on their land. And I think that there is a long way to go for them to do that. She spoke about, the opposition leader spoke about election commitments 101. That was the pot calling the kettle black because, I mean, seriously, we have seen 8 years of a Labor government that put us in an absolute crime crisis. We've got crime out of control right across the Territory, to which 11 years into a 4-year term of government, we are slowly clawing back some points. We have certainly a long way to go, Madam Speaker. It was almost like she was in an alternate universe, or I was listening to an episode of Utopia or something. It was just absolutely quite ridiculous, some of the comments she was making. I just want to also, the opposition leader spoke about integrity, and as we all know, and we certainly have seen the Restoring Integrity to Government paper that was tabled on the 30th of November 2016. And inside that document, we've all seen it over many years, talk about integrity. I tell you, if my morals and integrity were ever compromised in this job, Madam Speaker, I would not be here. And that is the kind of person I am, and I would never have my morals and integrity compromised. I'd be stepping down. So in this document, the Chief Minister at the time, Michael Gunner, says Territorians want and deserve a government they can trust. Yeah, sure, they sure do. An open, accountable and transparent government is essential for this trust to exist. Well, it's a pity that for 8 years we saw that trust eroded, the absolute incompetence that happened of the then Labor government. As I said, crime crisis, we saw literacy and numeracy absolutely fail right across the territory. We had 4 education ministers over that time, to which the opposition leader was one of them. And, we saw 58% of all students, 85% of Aboriginal students failing literacy and numeracy. We saw the shocking rates of attendance right across the territory. So for the opposition leader to come in and be giving a spray about all these things that we should be doing, Madam Speaker, we have introduced attendance officers back into the community. They are working hard. They are out there working and talking to families and getting kids back to school. We also saw there was the secret list that Labor had of all the students, and there was about, off the top of my head, 1,600 students on that list that literally had not been to school for 20 days or more. 500 or so of those kids are now back in school, and we have more children going into school. But, because they haven't been for so long, Madam Speaker, there is a lot of work and a lot of catch-up that those teachers need to support those children with. The opposition leader claimed that schools are paying for transport for swimming lessons. I mean, this is absolute garbage, Madam Speaker. It is constantly used, this line, which is untrue. And I've invited the opposition leader to bring forward these claims, if they have any, which I suspect they don't because I've heard crickets, and none of these claims have been substantiated. So, through you, Madam Speaker, opposition leader, if there are any schools that are paying for their own travel, I'd like to hear from them. And I'd like to hear, who they are. So far, Madam Speaker, we've had 50 NT government schools, roughly 5,500 primary school students have participated in our swimming lessons. They were free swimming lessons that, under the previous government, we have the worst drowning rates in the territory, in Australia, here in the territory. With the lifestyle we have, the weather that we have, the amount of people that have a pool or go to a lake or a billabong or whatever, there are many people that spend a lot of time in and around the water, and yet for many, many years that was not a priority for people, for young children to learn swimming. And as an ex-swimming teacher myself, that is something that is very important to make sure that children are swimming. So we put forward that was brought to us by an alliance and as an election commitment, these swimming lessons that will happen for years 1 to 6 right across the territory. So as I said, 50 of those government schools have already participated, and there's another 73 NT government schools set to participate in terms 3 and 4, and I look forward to that. Some of those examples of remote schools travelling for swimming, which the opposition leader is obviously unaware of, that remote schools can travel for swimming. In Amambidji, Madam Speaker, where the closest pool identified was in Kununurra, WA, students and staff travelled to Kununurra to do the swimming program. At Shepparton College in Gallowinku, they are working with their urban satellite school to schedule swimming programs as students attend urban excursions. The leader of the opposition talks a big game about crime, but when she talks like with her chin about issues in Katherine, which I heard earlier this morning, I mean, all of a sudden, for the last 8 years, the opposition leader, as a member of the government and as somebody who lives in Katherine and has lived in Katherine for many years, I heard crickets from her about Katherine. But now, all of a sudden, Katherine seems to be her centre of the universe as well. It's been mine for 35 years, but all of a sudden she's just realised that Katherine actually is worth saving. So, I just find it embarrassing, the comments that she made this morning, that she couldn't even step down 2 doors to go and see Nikki at the coffee club because it wasn't her electorate. Like, please, give me a break. Madam Speaker, when we were in opposition, when we went out to remote areas, as a member, you go and call into anywhere, whether it be a school, whether it be a business, whether it be a station, no matter what it is. You call in and you talk to these people. Many times I've spoken to people in 𝙏𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏𝙀, which is in the member for Arnhem's electorate, because she doesn't listen to them. She doesn't go and talk to those businesses in the main street of 𝙏𝙒𝙀𝙏. And, you know, she can comment all she likes, but I know for a fact that she does not go in and talk to those people because they've rung me. And as a team, we have been down there and spoken to some of those businesses. One commentator said, with the commentary from the member for Leader of the Opposition, who's still calling out, Madam Speaker, interjecting, you've already had your turn. I sat there and listened to you, Opposition Leader, so you can stop your interjections. Madam Speaker, I call you to either send her out or ask her to stop interjecting, because I did not interject while she spoke.
Okay,
So,
can you just pause? I'm not, even though it's late, it's 7 o'clock, I'm not going to put up with interjections, and I'm not going to be told how to manage the parliament. So both sides, please retain some decorum or find some decorum. Please continue. Member for Katherine.
thank you, Madam Speaker. So, from the opposition leader's little rant this morning, I put up a post on my social media just to see what the people of Katherine thought about that. You know, some comments, Madam Speaker. It's sad as a community leader she can't even help with addressing the antisocial, unacceptable issues of her hometown. Sad if, as reported, she did not check on the coffee club owner and staff. You know, Madam Speaker, the opposition leader is acting, you know, as if she speaks for our backbench, but you know, she didn't even have a voice at the table in her own government that she is the leader of. We, on this side of the House, have spent $1.9 million to expand counsellors, unlike Labor, who decided they wanted to rip counsellors out of schools and put them in the Mitchell Centre. We have expanded that counsellor program right across the territory because we know, Madam Speaker, that when a student needs to go and talk to someone and they have a concern, they want to go and talk to somebody behind a door. They don't want to get on an email. They don't want to have to call someone. They certainly don't want to make an appointment to talk to somebody who might even not be in their community. So we've expanded that school counsellor program to roll that out right across the territory. We've spent $3 million to expand the school-based police program, and in 2025 a new program will supplement the school-based police as well, and they'll be with the ALOs, the Aboriginal Liaison Officers. And this is a really nice fit, Madam Speaker, because the Aboriginal Liaison Officers generally are people that know a lot of the kids in the school. They certainly are in my community. The Aboriginal Liaison Officers have lived in Katherine for a long time. They know the students, they know the concerns that are going on, and it's a really nice fit for the Katherine High School and for our broader community to have those ALOs working with those students. The other thing, I just wanted to, another couple of examples of remote schools travelling for swimming lessons. Amambidji School, where the closest pool identified, I told you about that one there, in Kununurra. Yeah, so Madam Speaker, I just wanted to just address some of those issues that the opposition leader was talking about, because I didn't think it was right that I should sit here and listen to the absolute waffle and the untruth that she gets up and thinks she can rewrite history. Because with the commentary that the opposition leader, what we heard with her going on, I dare say that maybe they haven't learnt anything, and they potentially will be out there in the wilderness for a long time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for 𝙏𝙖𝙎𝙏.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I do rise tonight in relation to the matter for public importance that the Leader of the Opposition has brought forward around the Country Liberal Party as government's broken promises and cuts. Madam Speaker, this is incredibly important to talk about tonight because what is clear and what has become painfully obvious to Territorians is that the CLP government is all talk, no delivery. They were elected on a platform of promises, bold headlines and big commitments. But after 11 months, all we've seen is spin, excuses and failures. The Education Minister has stood up here and spoken about what you need to do when you go bush. Well, Madam Speaker, maybe she might need to talk to her Cabinet colleagues who have failed to go bush, who have failed to listen to Territorians. Now, I want to make it really clear, there are a number of members I am aware opposite who do go bush. Steve Edgington, the member for Barclay, and of course the Robin Carl, the member for Port Darwin. I hope one of them is the future Chief Minister for a country Liberal government, because they probably wouldn't do as bad as they're doing now. But they have been bush, and I do acknowledge that. But the Attorney-General, the Northern Territory's first law officer, today in Parliament said, I don't really need to go bush because my other colleagues who go bush, well, they'll just tell me. No. The Attorney-General is the first law officer, has carriage over the implementation and the delivery and the rollout of law and justice groups in the Northern Territory. She could not bring herself today to be honest with Parliament and tell Parliament that she has not met with one single law and justice group in 11 months. That is a big, fat failure, Madam Speaker. Remote people deserve access to their members of Parliament and to ministers just as any other person does across the Northern Territory. Now, Madam Speaker, we know that the Northern Territory is an amazing place. It's rich in culture, heritage and the landscape. But we know that we continue to make national headlines for all the wrong reasons. We are now the second highest incarceration rate in the world. Not just in Australia, not just in the Southern Hemisphere, in the world, Madam Speaker. Meanwhile, violent crime is rising, community safety is deteriorating, and the CLP's so-called law and order agenda is in tatters. Now, Territorians, they aren't demanding apologies, they're demanding answers. They're demanding results. And what they're getting from the Chief Minister is deflection, division and disgrace. This is a Chief Minister who talks tough on crime but has no plan. A Chief Minister who laughs when people raise real concerns, who dismisses lived experience, blames everyone else and then has the nerve to call people who speak up apologists. Let me be clear, Madam Speaker, Territorians are not apologists. They're parents, they're workers, they're teachers, they're business owners, they're survivors, and they're fed up being lied to. Madam Speaker, I do want to touch on a number of things. We've heard the government say one thing and do another. They promised a lobby register. They delivered a watered-down vision that lacks transparency. They spoke about underground power, but they didn't commit to it in an election, Madam Speaker. They remained silent and lied to Territorians. They poured $21 million into the Territory Coordinator's office. Madam Speaker, do you know how many fast-track projects the Territory Coordinator's office has delivered at an established cost of $21 million? Not one. Let's be honest, that role was never about the delivery of fast-tracking projects. It was about looking after mates. They scrapped their 50% renewable energy by 2030 and then lied about it. They didn't tell people what it would cost. So much for a climate plan. This is a government addicted to short-term thinking and headline chasing. Madam Speaker, I am a remote member and I absolutely know the devastation that the ranger cuts have in the bush. In opposition, Madam Speaker, the government did commit to continuing and rolling out a new program and a renewed program for the Aboriginal Ranger grants. Yet, when they're in government, we've seen that cut. Madam Speaker, we've seen from this government cuts and broken promises. $8.7 million cut from the Ali Kurung School. Funding reprioritised for Yuendamu and Yirrkala schools. That's a fancy word for cut. We've had homeland centres reprioritised. That means gone. Madam Speaker, this is infrastructure in the bush that keeps kids strong, keeps kids in schools, helps to break the cycle of disadvantage and build strong communities. But instead of investing in solutions, they're wasting $21 million on truancy officers for a failed policy that's already been tried and scrapped. Don't get me wrong, Madam Speaker, those officers are doing their best. Those officers are doing a great job. But this government keeps throwing money at the wrong end of the problem. Kids need classrooms, not slogans. I'll pick up on the interjections from the Education Minister. If she thinks that I'm lying, I'm simply quoting the NT News that have revealed the $21 million expense is a failed policy. Now let's talk about the Aboriginal Ranger grants. Before the election, the CLP government promised that $12 million over 4 years. Rangers out on country, protecting land, protecting culture, protecting community. Now, no renewal, no 12 million, just another broken promise, just another lie. These are real jobs with real outcomes. Jobs that reduce crime, promote community, promote country. Jobs that the CLP government could have stood and protected. Madam Speaker, and perhaps the most appalling cut of all, critical upgrades to Dawn House. Right in the middle of a domestic violence crisis, the government cut the funding. Now, the government will say it was money that was never really there. But thankfully, people in the public service stay honest and stay true. And the departments have said, even in infrastructure, we had the money, it was being held by us because Dawn House couldn't do it. Dawn House, Madam Speaker, turns away hundreds of women and children each month because they simply don't have the space. They were promised $8 million. Now it's been prioritised. Again, that's the flash word for cut. That's the flash word for betrayal. Yet this government says they're investing $36 million annually in domestic violence services. But where is it? What money is needed is out on the front line, not sitting in a press release. We need leadership that actually listens to the sector, works with the federal government and walks alongside those doing the work on the ground. Madam Speaker, we will never jail our way out of the crisis we are in. And yet that is exactly what this government keeps on trying to do. Rushing through legislation, locking up more people while cutting support to programs that work. I've said and I've spoken about the law and justice groups. If this government was serious, they'd invest in diversion, in healing, in housing, in jobs, in truth-telling. Madam Speaker, the Treasurer gave his contribution tonight and spoke about how he cared about the economy, how the economic opportunities for the Territory are right and amazing. Well, Madam Speaker, it's interesting that the Treasurer couldn't even be bothered to participate and attend in the government's very own economic positions. The Treasurer was a no-show at the NT News Economic Forum. He wasn't at the Catherine Show. We didn't see the boat trailer, Madam Speaker. This is a government who say one thing and do another. This is coming from the Treasurer who says he cares about it, yet he's had very limited involvement. They've saved the most responsible economic managers, and that's the member for Port Darwin, to hold those forums, because the Treasurer, Bill Yan, is the bill the Territory can't afford. Madam Speaker, over the last 11 months, this government has run on headlines, on broken promises at every turn. The result, more women and men experiencing violence, more young people being locked up, more Territorians losing faith in the system that is meant to protect them. This isn't a government fixing crime, it's criminalising disadvantage. It's time for the CLP to stop the spin, keep their promises and start delivering, because the Territorians deserve better. Madam Speaker, the Education Minister, the member for Catherine, who really has no idea how the land councils work, comes in here and talks about the land council should be focused on economic opportunities. Land councils absolutely are. Land councils work with traditional owners and Aboriginal land trusts to look at how they can leverage economic opportunities and investment. Madam Speaker, it's incredibly disrespectful. But when you talk to any service provider across the Northern Territory and you ask them what they think of this government, the response is quite interesting depending on who you talk to. Because if you're talking to someone in the social services sector, if you're talking to someone in the remote construction space, if you're talking to someone in the arts space, they'll say to you, they refuse to meet with us. They don't respond to our emails. They ignored us at the shows. And Madam Speaker, of course the Chief Minister talks a big game on community safety. As I said earlier, she wanders around with her bodyguards. She hadn't been to Alice Springs since February until she went to the Alice Springs show. That's how much she cares about Alice Springs, Madam Speaker. Well, the good people of Alice Springs deserve to have the Chief Minister down there regularly. The government talks about Labor being secretive. This is a government that runs on secrets. They don't tell Territorians when the Chief Minister is going to be in Alice Springs because they know the Chief Minister is going to cuck her because people are going to be holding her to account. They're going to be saying to her, what are you doing? Why are you ignoring our wishes? Why are you breaking promises? You've got the Environment Minister who calls Alice Springs home, trying to recreate history around all the funding cuts that he has enabled in the environment space, Madam Speaker. This is a government, I tell you what, they do have some good spinsters on the 5th floor because they churn out that machine and they try their hardest to recreate the problems that they create for the Northern Territory. Now, Madam Speaker, there is a lot to talk about, obviously right across the Northern Territory. But I would urge this government to not close the door on the electorates that aren't held by Labor, by the CLP. Where there are independents, where there are Greens, where there are Labor, they are still Territorians and they deserve to have the Northern Territory Cabinet engaging with them, not being ignored. The bush holds a number of answers to many of our complex problems. They have lots of solutions around responding to crime and antisocial behaviour. They've got lots of solutions about the economic prosperity of the Northern Territory, and these are all things that they shouldn't be ignored on. Now, Madam Speaker, it is incredibly important that this government is held to account. That's the job of an effective opposition, is to ask those hard questions, is to talk to people from the community and raise those questions in Parliament and written questions on notice and in estimates. And what we have seen, Madam Speaker, is that the government focus all their energy in one area because the Chief Minister is a one-trick pony. All she knows is to talk one way. And if you don't agree with her, she makes it her mission to discredit you, to attack you and to demonise you. We're seeing that out in the community now with organisations and services. Now, I want to make it clear as well that you have failed Aboriginal Territorians. And to come in here and for people to insinuate that it's a grandstanding exercise by the land councils, no, it's not. You talk to any Aboriginal person anywhere and they will say to you they are absolutely worried about what this government is doing to Aboriginal people, whether that's in housing, whether that's investments, whether that's in the arts. This is a government who claim about supporting the arts. We found out in estimates, not an additional single dollar, not even a new program for the arts. No arts trails, no music trails, nothing. The arts contribute significantly to the Northern Territory's economy. Over $730 million a year the arts bring to the Northern Territory, but under this government they are not considered important. That is an absolute shame. We'll have the Darwin Aboriginal Art Fair next week, the National Indigenous Fashion Awards, the Music Awards. They bring thousands of dollars into the NT. I guarantee you everyone here will be styling up for a photo. Back it in with funding.
Are there any other speakers? Member for Daly.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise tonight in support of this matter of public importance brought forward by the Leader of the Opposition. Madam Speaker, Territorians have become increasingly concerned over the recent months about the direction this CLP government is taking the Territory down. They're concerned about the growing pattern of deception and lack of integrity, as well as the promises and election commitments that they have been scrapped, shelved, or not delivered. Let's first turn to community safety, Madam Speaker, a subject I know concerns all of us here in the chamber. Well before the last election, the CLP was promising Territorians they would improve community safety, pledging to reduce crime and back our police force. But month after month since coming to government, we can see the evidence that shows their policies are doing exactly the opposite. The statistics paint a grim outlook for the Territory. This year so far, total assaults in the Territory are up by 1.7%. Serious assaults increased by almost 6%. Domestic violence assaults have risen 9.3%, with alcohol-related domestic violence soaring by more than 10%. Sexual offences are increasing by over 22%. Offences endangering people have increased by over 30%. Alcohol-related violence has increased by more than 8%. The statistics don't outline an isolated surge, it's territory-wide. Crime hasn't gone down, it's gone up, and continuing to hit local businesses and families time and time again. It's unbelievable to hear those opposite say the increase isn't that bad, but how on earth can they justify an increase in crime that it's not that bad? But as CLP failed to reduce crime, the Chief Minister and those opposite continue to try and move the goalposts. First, they're all about statistics, but since they're not trending in their favour, now it's when the community feels safe. They have few accolades to back up their views because they don't believe in facts or data, and apparently that's enough proof for them that they're doing a good job. But, Madam Speaker, the community doesn't feel safe under this CLP government. Residents in Alice Springs, Tennant Creek, Katherine, Palmerston and Darwin all feel worse and worse off. How do we know? We see it and we hear it every single day. Territorians are frustrated, and rightly so. The CLP promised the world and has delivered a snow globe. The Chief Minister can duck and weave and carefully curate her Facebook posts, but that won't cover for the fact that she has left Territorians and our communities in the dust and our police force high and dry. They cut for security patrols in Meningrida, scrapped the Pepperminardi police station, and they've thrown police a pathetic 3% pay offer while simultaneously trying to strip 177 police officers of their housing. The police EBA process has become so badly bungled by the Minister for Public Service, the member for Katherine, Jo Hersey, that she needs her Northern Territory Police Association, which the Northern Territory Police Association publicly called in the Chief Minister to take over those negotiations because she wasn't capable of doing it herself as the Minister. Madam Speaker, when it comes to the CLP's record on integrity and transparency in this parliament, they have broken their promises to Territorians. They did, however, re-establish the Legislative Scrutiny Committee, but have only referred 6 out of the 29 pieces of legislation for consideration. Then they come in here and stop the opposition and crossbench referring legislation to the committee. They remove the ability for non-government members to do so in the standing orders, sessional orders. An action which directly contradicts the Chief Minister's statements back in 2020 as the former leader of the opposition when she stated, we do not have the other review mechanisms for legislation. Territorians wouldn't be wrong in thinking, Madam Speaker, that the Chief Minister, along with her colleagues, can't handle constructive criticism. The issue with parliamentary integrity and transparency already sits on top of the member for Katherine's inability to divest her shares after becoming a minister, an action explicitly committed to by the CLP ahead of the 2024 election. Territorians deserve better. Madam Speaker, Territorians are still navigating a health system under pressure, a health system recently plagued by code yellows, which the Health Minister tried to avoid calling. Only last month, during estimates processes, did we see the Minister boast code yellows were no longer necessarily and dismiss concerns from the opposition and health sector organisations such as AMA&T that Territory hospitals and health staff were under immense pressure. I raised this issue, Madam Speaker, because when we finally saw a code yellow called at the Royal Darwin Hospital and Palmerston Regional Hospital on the 8th of July, and then at the Alice Springs Hospital on the 22nd of July, the Minister hid away. He threw his CEO under the bus. Not one single media release from the Minister's office, Madam Speaker, not even an acknowledgement. He sent his CEO on radio to do his job. He hid away. Maybe somewhere in the Barclay he went hiding, but he couldn't even get on radio to explain to Territorians why there'd been a code yellow or put a media statement out. Madam Speaker, Territorians deserve better leadership than that, especially from the Health Minister, who we all know likes to be very visible. Yes, unlike the Chief Minister, that's right, Leader of the Opposition. We know she goes hiding. I think it took her a few months to get down to Alice Springs that day. I think it was February, and then it came to the show day, and she finally showed up, but she didn't tell anyone. Just a big media stunt for everyone, that's all it was. With her bodyguards, that's right, Member for 𝙏𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙎. But turning to infrastructure, Madam Speaker, the CLP government has traded long-term progress for short-term political headlines. They ripped funding from the underground power program, denying residents of Darwin's northern suburbs, including Wagaman, Allawa, Moyle and Coconut Grove power certainty during future emergency events. They cut the 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 Health Clinic, an essential piece of health infrastructure, despite design and tender documents being finalised and ready for construction. Residents of 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 are left with a deteriorating facility, riddled with asbestos, and are forced to rely on transporting more patients from remote areas to an already overcrowded Royal Darwin Hospital. These are just a few examples of the shelved commitments as part of a budget which cut a whopping $1 billion out of the Territory's infrastructure program. This is a direct cut to the future prosperity of those communities. Madam Speaker, we can also point to other commitments that have been broken, scrapped or shelved. The CLP scrapped the 50% by 2030 renewables target and blatantly lied about the cost of achieving the target, relegating Territorians to an unsustainable future. They scrapped an election commitment targeted of 43% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, but didn't tell anyone about it. They promised Territorians that a CLP government would double solar feed-in tariffs during peak times before the election, but then announced it would only apply between 3 p.m. and 9 p.m. rather than the peak hours of 6 a.m. To 6 p.m. The member for 𝙏𝙬𝙈 spoke earlier about the $12 million cut in funding for Aboriginal ranger groups, which I found quite astounding. I remember standing on the voting booths at that time and the CLP candidate at the time promising Aboriginal Territorians that there'll be $12 million in grant funding. But this isn't just a slap in the face to our rangers, it's also a slap in the face to our police force, which our rangers work very closely with. And I can talk to that because I was out in Wadeye last week when a community member from a homeland went missing for over 2 weeks. And it was the 𝙏𝙗𝙗 Development Rangers and the local police and the police search and rescue from Darwin that were working in collaboration to find where this missing person went. And this type of funding will help in ensuring that our frontline services such as rangers and police can work in collaboration when we see those incidents happen. Thankfully, the community member was found 2 weeks later, just the other day. But it wouldn't have been it wouldn't have been for the efforts for the police and those rangers, but yet here we see the cuts from the CLP government. Even a couple of years ago, when there was a tragic incident in Palumpa, when the young girl was tragically taken by a crocodile, which I went out there at the time to the site to support the police and the rangers at the time. But the police relied heavily on the local knowledge of the rangers. The 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 Rangers again, who, another shout out to them, did an absolute amazing job. It was takes a huge emotional toll on a lot of those rangers because it was their family member of the kid that went missing, that got taken by that crocodile out in Palumpa. They stayed there day and night, day and night. They did not leave for days until they found the young kid that got taken by a crocodile out there. And yet, here we have a CLP government cutting funding to our crucial rangers that work in collaboration with our police force when we have serious issues like this. It's an absolute shame. You should all hang your head in shame, going out there and promising Territorians and Aboriginal Territorians that you're going to fund rangers $12 million in grants, but yet you haven't gone back out there to tell them you're not going to do it. You haven't faced up to the ranger groups. Has any of the ministers gone to any of the rangers to tell them that you've cut the $12 million? I pick up on the member for Blaine. He doesn't care. They were your cuts. You were the one that would promise them. You were the one that said you were going to do $12 million ranger grants, and you cut it from your budget. You cut it from your budget. It's an absolute disgrace. You should be ashamed of yourself. They flip-flopped on their commitment to ban gill net fishing with no clear timelines on whether the minister will meet this election pledge. People are watching and waiting. In closing, Mr Deputy Speaker, Territorians deserve leadership that builds up communities, that listens, that keeps its word. They deserve a thoughtful and comprehensive plan for the Territory, one that effectively addresses the commitment to enhance community safety, improve infrastructure, expand access to healthcare, ensure secure housing, create employment opportunities and promote environmental sustainability. Mr Deputy Speaker, I will pick up from the Minister for Education who stated, I think she called out to us to identify the schools that have been talking to us about who they're dipping into their budget around free swimming lessons. But I can tell you right now, when I've met with those schools, and our schools, all of our schools, they have asked us not to say who they are because they are worried that the minister will step in and take away their jobs. But also, the minister should actually go and do her job and go and visit those schools in our electorates, because she never gets out to our electorates because it's Labor electorates that we've won our seats, but she doesn't get there. I've been to every school in my electorate, and consistently they have told me that they are cutting into their budget from the free swimming lessons.
Order. Stop the interjections,
No, I've never
please.
heard any of them tell me not to come back. I love all my schools in my area.
Just petty name calling, that's all.
It's very petty. It's always very petty from those opposite because they don't know how to do their job.
Please. Can we ask that both sides stop interjecting? Thank you. Continue.
Member for Fanny Bay, don't worry, I've got a minute, so I'll continue to speak for that minute. But what I do suggest is that you go and speak to your Education Minister and tell her to get out to all the schools, including remote areas, because I don't believe she's been to any remote community, or maybe one or two, but that's it. But as the I remember when Selena Uibo was the Education Minister, she got out to most schools across the Northern Territory. Most schools, because a lot of the time I was out there with her during that time. So it's an absolute shame that here we have the member for Katherine, the Education Minister, can't even get out to the schools outside of Katherine or outside of Darwin and speak to those teachers that are putting in the hard work about these free lessons and how it's impacting their school budget. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Daly. Member for Goyder.
Mr Deputy Speaker, every time I write a speech, I write Madam Speaker and then you take the chair right before, so I think it's a bit unfair. So I do apologise in advance. Now, as I rise today, I ask myself, just how utterly pathetic is this opposition? It's tired, it's weak, it's like a wet paper towel, Mr Deputy Speaker. We've just spent months, the past month, travelling across the territory from the centre to the top end along the show circuit. I saw the member for 𝙏𝙬𝙈𝙀𝙎, I believe, at every single show along the way, as well as the members for Arnhem, Arafura and Daly. And when we were at these shows, Mr Deputy Speaker, meeting Territorians, listening to what really matters to them along the track, Territorians are talking about jobs. They're talking about safer communities. They're talking about the cost of living, about the future of their kids, and how much it costs to buy a Dagwood dog. And tonight, this MPI, this is what the Labor Party hacks on the fourth floor, the spin doctors, think is the biggest issue of the day. What a joke. This so-called matter of public importance isn't even structured like a serious MPI. It's nothing but a laundry list of tired political point scoring and a desperate attempt to distract Territorians from the fact that Labor is still licking its wounds after being booted out of office and has no ideas of their own. We heard the Leader of the Opposition this morning, and even she admitted that Territorians don't want political point scoring. They want action. And that's what this government is delivering. Those opposite, just more finger pointing and point scoring. And frankly, most of the points they try to score end up being own goals. Perhaps they took their political lessons from the former member for Johnston with his infamous rushed behinds. Speaking of that former member, where is he now? Perhaps he scored too many rushed behinds in politics, and that's why we have a new member for Johnston in this chamber tonight. Now let me start with this nonsense about the underground power. We need to set the record straight. A little history lesson is in order. The former member for Drysdale, 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎, does that name ring a bell? Perhaps the opposition leader should ask the member for 𝙏𝙎𝙎 sitting behind her. He's always behind you, Leader of the Opposition, waiting for his turn in your seat. But he was 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎's Deputy Chief Minister, after all. A very good political friend. Now, when your Chief Minister, 𝙏𝙏𝙈𝙎, made a promise to deliver underground power in the northern suburbs, that was not a CLP promise. That was yours. Now, she may not be in the right faction or the left faction or the correct faction for you, but she was actually a member of your party, not a member of ours. Now, the Labor Party owned that promise. The Labor Party didn't deliver it. The Labor Party didn't fund it. And the Labor Party lied to Territorians about what it would achieve. And now, with a straight face, you're sitting there accusing this government of breaking their own undelivered commitment. Mr Deputy Speaker, it's laughable. If the hacks on the fourth floor spent half as much time fact-checking their own party's failures as they do scribbling these dodgy MPIs, the opposition might avoid embarrassing themselves so publicly once again. Reneging on renewables and climate change targets? Here we go again with the climate wedge politics. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, I apologise in advance to the member for Nightcliff, but I can say with complete confidence that I didn't lose a wink of sleep on this one. Now, let's talk facts. Prior to the 2024 NT election, the Environmental Centre did a survey of all political parties. In that survey, the CLP did commit to a 43% emissions target reduction by 2030, in line with the federal government. NT Labor, on the hand, committed to legislated emissions reduction targets, but would not say what those targets were, merely stating that they would suit the territory context. Well, Mr Deputy Speaker, we came into government, we opened the books, and we saw what was left behind. And guess what? There was no pathway to achieve those targets, none. Now, did we take a move out of the Labor Party's books and just lie to Territorians and say we're getting on with it? Did we keep pretending? No, we were honest with Territorians. We told people the truth. Mr Deputy Speaker, they don't know what the truth is, so it's a bit confusing, but it's basically when you say what actually happened instead of saying like something that you want to happen that's not going to happen. And the reality is, if climate was the #1 issue for Territorians, there'd be more than one accidental Green in this chamber. Territorians want a balance, protecting our environment while growing jobs in our economy, and that's what the CLP is doing. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, this is where I almost choked on my morning Red Bull this morning, reading the MPI. Community safety, the big one. Failing to deliver on community safety. What an absolute joke. This is coming from the same failed opposition that presided over the highest levels of crime and antisocial behaviour in the Territory has ever seen. The same opposition that, when in power, handcuffed police with watered-down bail laws. The same opposition that let our streets turn into battlegrounds. The gall of these people, Mr Deputy Speaker, to accuse the CLP, the party actually actively working to restore law and order, of failing on community safety is beyond belief. I've even seen former Labor candidates calling for very, very right-wing suggestions of how we're not going far enough on crime, Mr Deputy Speaker. I'll tell you after. I've got his name, but I don't want to promote him for free.
Member
right?
for Gordon, Director. Comments.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I would hate to do the Labor Party's job for them. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, we have rolled up our sleeves. We are rebuilding the laws that Labor dismantled. We are backing our police and giving them the powers to do their job. We are resourcing the courts and providing ongoing funding so they can get on with the job of dealing with Labor's mess. We are taking violent offenders off the streets instead of the revolving door justice system Labor gave us. Territorians voted for law and order, and that's why we're here, and that's what we are trying to do every single day. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, unfortunately there isn't a magic crystal ball, and we can't snap our fingers or do a bewitched and play with our noses and make everything happy in a day, but we are actively trying to make the Territory a better and safer place. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, getting to the second half or the later part of this, I don't know how many words it was, but it felt like reading a novel, MPI, we get to the cut critical funding to Aboriginal Rangers, cuts to key infrastructure in roads, health and education. And Mr Deputy Speaker, I hate to break it to those opposite, but you can't cut what never existed. Here's the truth, Mr Deputy Speaker. Your former chief ministers, your friends, your former cabinet colleagues, they lied to you and they lied to Territorians. They made promise after promise, but when you and I and Territorians looked at the budget books, the money wasn't there. And it was always next year, next budget, next year, one more year. I'm sure you'll get it next year. And Mr Deputy Speaker, guess what? Next year never came. We opened the books and found a financial mess. A mess that Labor created and then tried to hide with glossy brochures and empty slogans. You want to talk about roads, health and education? Where was the investment when you had your 8 years in government? Where were the new schools? Where were the major road upgrades in remote communities? This is on estimates, you can write to me later. Where was the investment in critical health infrastructure? Why do the electorates the opposition represent still have poor education and health outcomes? What did Labor do for the bush? It failed them. It failed them and it lied to them time and time again.
Member for
We are the
Gordon,
ones
stop
cleaning
interjecting,
up.
please.
We are the ones cleaning up on your mess and making sure projects that do go ahead are funded and actually happen. We're building the road out to from Wadeye to Palumpa. We're sealing another 20 k's of the Sandover Highway in the Barkly. We're building a new health centre in Borroloola. We're investing in roads on the Tiwi Islands. We're making the Arnhem Highway safe again. We're fixing your mess. Now, Madam Speaker, Territorians know the CLP is getting on with the job. We're delivering real investment in roads that connect communities and support our economy. We're building on the energy and resource industries that create jobs, not strangle them with red tape. We are supporting Aboriginal Rangers and Indigenous communities by funding programs that actually deliver results. We're restoring confidence in law and order because Territorians are tired and were feeling very unsafe in their homes under Labor. And this MPI is just another sad, desperate attempt by the opposition to distract from their own failures. Mr Deputy Speaker, Territorians deserve better than this. I think the member for Daly said it in his speech. Territorians want leadership. I'd love to see some leadership on the other side of the room once in a blue moon. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, we deserve a real opposition that holds the government to account on real issues, not a hollowed echo chamber of political hacks upstairs trying to relive the glory days of their failed government. And while Labor wastes time on political games and holidays overseas, we're out there meeting Territorians, fixing the budget, the mess we inherited, and delivering the things that matter: jobs, safety and opportunity. If the opposition wants to be taken seriously, they might want to start by apologising to Territorians for their broken promises, the financial wreckage and the damage they left behind. Until then, Mr Deputy Speaker, I'll take no lectures from them on integrity, delivery or priorities.
Thank you, Member for 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎. Any further speakers?
I'm working on
Member for Arafura.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I rise today to address the matter of critical importance, the broken promises from the CLP government, and speak to the real and damaging consequences these commitments have had on our Territorians and especially my electorate. Let's start with crime. The Chief Minister and her government have come to office claiming they have a clear pathway to a safer territory, that they had a fix, and that was the commitment. Deputy Speaker, the evidence shows that this is exactly the opposite. Under this government, I'm going to go through some stats here, and it paints a grim picture as well. Serious assaults have increased by 6%. Domestic violence risen 9.3%, and alcohol-related domestic violence 10%. Sexual offences have spiked by 22%. Offences endangering people are up 30%. This surge isn't isolated. It's territory-wide. In Katherine, violent crime has increased nearly 30%. Palmerston faces climbing rates of violence and property crime. Alice Springs continues to experience an escalation of offences against the person. Deputy Speaker, the CLP can hold press conferences and issue as many press releases as they like, but numbers don't lie. When it comes to crime and safety, the territory is going backwards under this government. Yet remarkably, what do those opposite do in response? They take a chainsaw to programs that are designed to turn the tide, programs that are community-based, where community have solutions. You see that result at the 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 archipelago. You know, the community response and the community initiative has decreased crime by 80%. We need to use those models. Now in my electorate. Before the election, the CLP promised investment in community safety, to see real tangible actions to address crime. They have cut funding from the security patrols in Manuel, another community initiative which has been proven to reduce crime. This program wasn't a luxury, it was essential. It was wanted and needed by the community, and the community came together to create it. I guess the promise to make territory safer doesn't extend to the largest Aboriginal community in the country. The CLP government promised to get territory kids back into school with the truancy program, and I haven't seen any truancy officers in my West Arnhem region. I would like to give a notice to the Education Minister. Please come out there, talk to the people. We're all anxious to talk to you. Furthermore, they've slashed over $4 million for the Aboriginal Justice Initiatives, undermining Aboriginal Justice Agreement. So we've got the Namalaya Justice Committee at Manuel, and they're a part of the decision-making when it comes to the judiciary system for the children, for the youth. You know, it's more meaningful when countrymen and when leaders and elders are involved in the discussion. Because at the moment, when we lock kids up in Darwin, there is no presence. There is no humiliation for the kids. They just get locked up and get seen again in a couple of months' time. Law and justice groups have proven to keep people out of jail, providing young people with genuine alternatives to detention. It is crazy that the government is choosing to defund these critical programs. In 𝙏𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎 as well, what Member for Daly said earlier about the 20 million health clinic cut. 𝙏𝙎𝙎𝙀 is a fascinating place. In the wet season, it's an island. It is cut off from mainstream, like any roads. So people need to fly in and out for critical care. Can't even get to �𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎. The former government had planned renal infrastructure, emergency bays, and essential morgue facilities at 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎. Now, without consultation or justification, the CLP has quietly scrapped it. Deputy Speaker, it isn't a broken promise, but it is a profound breach of trust for 𝙏𝙏𝙈𝙀𝙎 and the region. Another betrayal extended to the Aboriginal Rangers before the election. The CLP praised Rangers' vital role in land management, cultural preservation, biosecurity, and community employment. Now, the member for Daly spoke about it earlier, but they also look after the country. And when illegal fishing boats were coming into Arnhem Land, they were the first point of contact. Rangers would find them from community people would see the illegal fishermen and contact the rangers would have the contacts and sometimes, contain them or help them, give them water. One of the accounts was they had an app, an interpretation app, some sort of app that a Chinese national couldn't understand the Aboriginal person or the Australian, and then he put that app on his phone and understood what he wanted or what he was saying. So the budget cut deeply into the Ranger Grants program. Rangers in our remote communities aren't just guardians of the land, custodians, but they are building local economies, providing meaningful employment, restoring pride, and teaching valuable skills to future generations. By cutting this, the government has cut opportunities, cut jobs, and undermined community strength. Deputy Speaker, I just want to touch on a bit of the on the money for swimming lessons. Now, some of us in this room, we can drive down to the nearest pool. Two of my islands in my electorate, Mindyalang and Warrawee, the nearest place is �𝙬𝙬𝙀. Cost about $3,500 for a 5-seater, right? And to get there. So to say that we have access to pools readily is just not true, especially for remote communities. And where's the money going instead? They pledged to pursue austerity measures, yet they've gutted funding from clinics, security patrols, and ranger programs. They've committed to supporting our remote communities, but instead have hit them with the hardest cost. And where is this money going instead? No more, not into the bush anyway, not into improved service or additional housing, not into stronger alcohol or drug services, not into youth diversion or genuine employment opportunities. Instead, we have government without directions when it comes to the bush, and only cuts and confuses the people and excuses. Territorians deserve better. They deserve more than empty promises. They deserve a government that honours its commitments with real action. The Labor opposition will always stand up for our communities. We will hold this government accountable for their broken promises. Because this is what the territory truly needs, is a government with genuine plan, a plan for safer communities, better healthcare, more jobs, secure housing, fair justice, and meaningful opportunities for all. Madam Speaker, how you going? I always come here and bang on about investing into programs to keep people in remote communities, right? There's always trouble when people come in truckloads into our regional centres. We want to keep them out there, and the way to keep them out there is create jobs, make sure there's healthcare, make sure there's housing out there, so that we can live in a better and healthier territory together. When the show weekend, a lot of Aboriginal people in town, it was good to see them all go back, but when they start lingering into bigger towns, they start spilling out into the parks, and, that's when trouble linger. So please invest in the communities. Try and keep our people in their communities so that they're not coming into town, only come into town for shopping and stuff, but we're coming more and more because there's a lack of service on the ground in our communities. we scrapped local government. Well, you promised it and you didn't say anything after that, did you?
Okay, enough of the interjections. Thanks.
Yeah.
Come on, let's keep it together.
Yeah, I'm
We're on the home run. Please
pinching a nerve
continue,
there for
Member
that.
for
Yeah,
Arafura.
Aboriginal Affairs Minister. AJAs and local decision making. Local decision making is what created the 𝙏𝙈𝙆𝙀𝙎𝙏𝙎 group, right? 80% decrease in crime. So just back communities. They know the answers to their own issues and for their own people. Thank you.
Are there any more speakers? Member for Blaine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know it's getting late and we all want to get out of here and go back to our families, so I'll try to keep this brief. The opposition brought this matter of public importance, well, so-called, because really it doesn't have any substance to it. But if they want to talk about broken commitments, broken election commitments, I would like to talk about a broken election commitment to my electorate of Blaine. In 2020, the then Labor candidate for Blaine was walking around and talking about a $300,000 commitment to the people of Blaine, to the people of 𝙏𝙏𝙈𝙆𝙆, to beautify their suburb. There's a long story with 𝙏𝙏𝙆, and I'll probably tell it another time, but suffice to say, under the dying days of the Henderson government, they were suffering from mismanagement of land releases and were desperately trying to get developments out the door. So they cooked up a dodgy deal with a developer from Western Australia and just handed it all over to them. And that developer, soon as all the lots were sold, they disappeared in smoke. So the promises that they'd made to the people who paid premium rates for the houses in 𝙏𝙏𝙆𝙆, that they would have green spaces and beautiful lakes to enjoy, all disappeared, and they were left with Crown land and just unkempt bush that was used by motorbikers and four-wheel drives. So the then Labor candidate for Blaine in 2020 made a lot of noise about having a $300,000 commitment from the government to beautify these lakes. Fast forward, he gets elected by a very narrow number of votes, and unfortunately then encounters some difficulty and is removed from caucus. Now, whatever happened to that commitment? I've recently been trying to chase up and find out what happened to that $300,000, and no one can tell me. It's almost like as soon as that member was kicked out of caucus, that commitment just disappeared. The people of 𝙏𝙆𝙆𝙆 were left absolutely hanging in the breeze. They've been there for 3 years now with no movement. So that funding that was committed, now I don't know if that money was delivered. I'll be trying to find out. And if it was delivered, hopefully we can see what we can get for it. But if we're talking about election commitments, that is one that was just completely ignored by the previous government. As soon as that member was gone, the people of 𝙏𝙆𝙆𝙆 were left swinging in the breeze. And to the people of 𝙏𝙆𝙆 I say, my commitment stands, and I will continue to fight to see you have the green spaces that were promised to you when you bought those lots off the plan all those years ago. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are there any more speakers on the matter of public importance? If not, that concludes the debate.